Welcome back to USC Coliseum Chronicles Live. I am Terrence Holton, joined alongside Casey Kasler for the Voice of College Football. Casey, how are we feeling today? We got a couple things we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, we're in the heart of the off season. USC baseball just qualified for the NCAA tournament for the first time in a decade. So,
Shout out them.
yeah, USC fans have something to look forward to. Maybe not necessarily just football, and ready to talk about gridiron regardless. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk a couple things today. As the title mentions, USC Notre Dame. We're a little late to this, but that rivalry could be coming to an end. But we'll talk about that in a second. But first, Casey, this happened a couple of days ago last week. That is RJ Surmans, the five-star cornerback for most sites, five-star, reclassified to 2025. He is joining the roster this upcoming season. What's up, Jackson Johnson, Alabama Voice of College Football guy? Casey, what does this do to the USC depth chart?
It's huge because we've talked about the depth chart a lot, and the weaker point of it was the secondary. And
Mm-hmm.
so now you bring in Surmans, who might not necessarily, play every single snap, but what you do is you gain a lot of leeway for the 2026 class, because we know that class is stacked with depth in the secondary. And so by bringing in Surmans, giving him an extra year to, work with the team, get some playing time, you give the guys in 2026 a lot of confidence to come to USC, because they're gonna, be a year behind Surmans, so they'll be able to kind of learn behind the rest of the group. But they'll also know that playing time can be won through reps and whatnot. So I think it's huge for the future, and I think it's big for this upcoming year as well.
Yeah, it's a massive addition. Look, we talked a couple weeks ago now about how this is an inexperienced DB room outside of a couple guys. Obviously, you got your Kamari Ramsey's in there, but it's a decently inexperienced group, especially at that cornerback position. Obviously, Sermon's inexperienced. That is the definition of it. But he's an ultra talented guy. It's someone who you can very much see getting reps immediately, because there isn't that many guys ahead of him who have gotten that many snaps. It's totally one of those huge additions that I just think adds depth to the USC depth chart. I think it's really a massive add. Obviously, it hurts the number one class in the class of 2026, but joining alongside I would say, mediocre class of 2025. Is that fair to say?
I'd say so.
What is
Yeah.
it, 15, 16 right now?
Yeah.
It's fine. It's nothing phenomenal like the 2026's one. It really it makes it better. It makes it more interesting. He's a physical corner. He's big. He's 6 foot. He can play inside, outside. I think it's a phenomenal addition. And we should also mention, obviously he's the son of Rod Surman. Am I getting that right? Yeah, the running back, Rod Surman, who played while back.
Yeah.
It's not bad though.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, his dad played in the '90s at USC, and I think for USC as well. I mean, he has a lot of speed, and we know tackling has been an issue in the secondary, in recent years. And I think having a guy who's just fast. I mean, he's plays track in high school. He runs track, so that's huge. Just an interesting thing. A lot of good athletes in that class. That I guess he's in the 2025 class now. But yeah, I mean, looking at the depth chart, you mentioned Kamari Ramsey. Marcellus Williams will also probably start, and then Prophet Brown in the nickel back. But I think you can really put Surmans in the nickel, and kind of put him there when needed, and see how he performs. Because again, I mean, he's not a guy that's going to play every snap, but I think if you can kind of ease him in, because I think out of a lot of the guys in the 2025 class, I mean, I think Surmans is probably the best chance of actually playing. Just looking at, I mean, we could break down that class another day more in depth, but I mean, Longstreet obviously is the big add, and then there's a bunch of other guys who like you said, don't necessarily stand out the same way that Longstreet does, but I think Surmans, he definitely stands out just because he's a 4-star, he's needed on the defense, and I think certainly could play a lot more than people might expect.
Yeah, no, I don't think. I mean, just going back to the class of 2025, I don't think that there's any really true freshmen who will get a lot of snaps on this team, especially on the defense. I mean, we've talked about it a lot. I think the defense is probably going to be better than the offense. I think the offense will be good. I think the defense will be great. So that's just kind of an indictment to, I mean, just everything that the defense has been building. Just crazy looking at it, what it was, 3 years ago. But anyways, Casey, let's move on. Obviously, huge ad, RJ Surmans. Can't wait till he gets on campus. We're a little late to this conversation, but USC Notre Dame, it's probably going to end. That's what it looks like.
Yeah, it's
Sorry.
no, sorry. I mean, it's tragic, right? Because I think like no matter what side you're on, whether it be USC or Notre Dame, you know, it's hard because this rivalry has been going for almost a century at this point,
Mhm.
and I mean, it's really gotten kind of you know political, not just to like put that word out there because I mean USC does not really want to play cards with Notre Dame, it seems, in terms of signing a long-term extension. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's hard because I think it's a top three rivalry, if not, yeah, I'd say top three rivalry in college football. The only one's better in my opinion, just because I'll say Army Navy, then Michigan Ohio State. I think Notre Dame USC because it's so random that these two teams are just these huge rivals. Obviously, it's the history, that's why, but it's so random that that's what makes it so special. And the fact that it's probably going to end is ridiculous. Obviously, there's been a lot of murmurs about this the past couple of years about USC ending the rivalry. It looks like it's probably going to be true. They can't seem to come on an extension for the rivalry.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, like, yeah, it does hurt when you're losing, an extra game every year if you're USC. Obviously you beat Notre Dame a few times these past, 5, 6 years, but by and large, Notre Dame has owned the rivalry. So I understand like the defeating feeling, but at the same time, like, why doesn't USC just get a better team together and try to beat Notre Dame that way instead of, just avoiding playing them all together? Because let's be real, like UCLA is a rival of USC, and I think they're privileged to have multiple big rivals. But the real rivalry is with Notre Dame because it's just
Mm-hmm.
they're such a more competitive program than UCLA is year in and year out. I mean, I don't think that's very that's not a very well kept secret at this point. We saw Notre Dame go to the national championship last year. They've been a competitive team year in and year out, really for the longest time. And I mean, yeah, I mean, for people watching, like USC did counter with a 1 year extension, but
That's
why
not
would,
enough.
yeah, why would also like, I mean, it's kind of obvious that, the 1 year deal is to just have Notre Dame come to the Coliseum one more time. So I think it's very clear that USC is, I mean, I don't know if I want to say scared, but they feel scared, but it just feels like they're doing everything they can to get out of this. And of course, they have Chad Bowden. They have a lot of ties to Notre Dame with him, and it's just weird seeing them want to cut this away at this point in time when USC seems to be on the up and Notre Dame seems to be on the down a little bit. And again, they're still Notre Dame. They're going to be good, but they've lost a lot of pieces. So yeah, I mean, very weird and I guess expected, but still just kind of disappointing to see.
It feels cowardly, if I may. I mean, with all due respect to our program, USC obviously had some down years. Very much think they're on the up this year. It feels like they're running from this. It feels like they just want to schedule someone easier, someone different. They always, Lincoln Riley, I'll say, has always cited of, the CFP, it's the uncertainty. You want to really get your schedule together. And you're adding this out of conference game, which the past couple of years, obviously Notre Dame has dominated. I still think it's one of those games where you just have to play it. It's such a historic rivalry. If you beat them, then it helps your CFP chance. This is so different than hypothetically scheduling Fresno State as and compared to either Notre Dame week, what is it, 7, 8, whenever they play in mid-October, or obviously Thanksgiving week versus Fresno State week 3. Like, how is that doing anything for your CFP chances? Yeah, you add a win, but is a win against Fresno State, no disrespect to any Fresno State people, is a win against Fresno State really much better than a close loss to Notre Dame? Or even if they get that win, obviously it's so much better. So I think, the risk reward in this game, it's so much better towards keeping the Notre Dame schedule.
Yeah, I mean, in USC's defense, and I agree with you. I just think like to play devil's advocate, um, I mean, with the CFP, and I guess this has always existed, whether it be a 4-team format or a 12-team format. But I mean, Notre Dame got in last year with a pretty cakewalk schedule, and I know they're an independent, so
Yeah.
it's a little different. But like, it feels like USC not winning the Big Ten will prevent them from getting in the CFP one way or another. I know multiple Big Ten teams can get in and got in,
Mhm.
but it just feels like with the competitive nature of the Big Ten, I mean, you see like last year, Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State all get in, and you know, none of those teams to me really had that tough of schedules.
Yeah.
So I think USC could still get in the CFP without Notre Dame if they play well. But like you said, I mean, it's excuse me. I feel like this rivalry is so special to the non-casual fans because I feel like you
Mhm.
said it's such a random rivalry, a team in South Bend, Indiana, a team in LA, but that's why it's important. But I feel like a big issue with it is it hasn't been marketed well. Like I feel like the USC UCLA rivalry, and we can speak on it firsthand because we're literally students on campus, is marketed heavily. And obviously that's because, it's a gathering that we can all go to year in and year out, no matter if it's home and or away. But I feel like the USC Notre Dame rivalry hasn't been marketed super well these past few years. And I don't know why that is. Maybe you have some insight on that, but it is interesting, noting the fact that both these teams are so historic, have had, a lot of success over their years. And it just feels like, it's kind of going to waste and tradition is being wasted that way. But I do think that USC not having Notre Dame benefits from a college football playoff chance standpoint. But I think you have to look back at what really matters. And I know making the CFP matters, but
Mhm.
why not just beat Notre Dame? Like, I think it's that simple.
Yeah, so just to go back to what you're saying about like the UCLA rivalry, I completely agree. I think this one is so much worse marketed as in the Notre Dame rivalry. We're on campus. If you were to go ask the average student, just some random student on campus, who do you think is better than who do you care more about as the rivalry, UCLA or Notre Dame? People care so much more about the UCLA one. That's just the average student. Us, we're football guys. We care a lot about the Notre Dame one just as much. But the average student at USC, I would say, really doesn't care that much about Notre Dame. You want your football team to win. You don't care that much other than that week, I think that's poor marketing. I think that's all that sort of stuff. I think it's terrible.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, again, like we saw Notre Dame and Michigan be kind of prior rivals, and they're not really. Yeah, I agree with this point as well. And that kind of change. And I think to Notre Dame's credit, they've really owned USC historically, and USC has had some good wins over Notre Dame. Don't get me wrong, like 2022, most recent one, that was electric. I wasn't there, but
That was
I'm
electric.
assuming, yeah, Terrence was there. Um, so yeah, I mean, again, it's I don't know if I agree with so much with this comment, just because I feel like it's not really the sports media that's not hyping it up. I feel like actually, if anything, you turn on college football, big noon kickoff, whatever you watch, and USC Notre Dame's always televised. It's always hyped up in that way. But I think locally in LA, it's not, hyped up to the extent that it should be.
Yeah, go to Roger Dodger's comment here. I think, yeah, I do think it's a difference between maybe alumni and students is honestly what it is. Like we were talking about, I think the student body cares a lot more about UCLA, obviously, because we play them in everything. So, you play them in not just football. Obviously, women's basketball played Notre Dame this year, but that's, just a home and home. The Notre Dame, it's a much better game. USC owns UCLA in football. So Notre Dame is always better because that's so much more historic. It's two blue bloods. But UCLA, it's just because I think USC plays them in basketball. I mean, the Galen Center, those are always awesome games to go to. And then even the little ones, we'll take a look at water polo. Those are always like fun because it's just hatred between each other. You don't have that with Notre Dame. That's my problem with it.
Yeah,
Um,
100%.
Casey, I'm sorry. I was going to bring up one thing. You mentioned earlier the Big Ten and teams getting in. The new proposal in the CFP of 4 teams making it from the Big Ten, 4 from the SEC. I think that if anything, keeping the Notre Dame on the schedule for that 4 Big Ten teams helps USC because, that doesn't count as a conference loss, but hypothetically you win that, it helps your seeding even more. That's what I think of it.
I agree. I mean, in that regard, I definitely agree. I think as far as winning the Big Ten goes, it's a little bit maybe different just because your overall record is going to affect that. But no, I 100% agree. And I think seeing teams like Oregon, schedule these really easy. I mean, they did play Boise State last year, but of course, no one really knew that Boise State would be the team that they would be. So I can't really give them too much credit for that. But my point is, I like that, and I think USC is not willing to take risks because it is a big risk. And so yeah, and I mean it's a good point. Like the TV is a aspect
TV
of it.
controls everything.
Yeah. So I just think it's disappointing if you're a USC fan, and you can't really blame Notre Dame because we know that they want to extend it. So it's pretty public at this point that USC gave a 1-year extension, and Notre Dame said no. We rightfully that we don't want to play ball like that. It's kind of shady the way that USC's handling it. And I mean, we've seen. I wanted to get your take on this too. We've seen at least one donor threaten to take USC out of their will because of this.
Which is a crazy thing. With all due respect to donating money to our school, that is a crazy thing to have USC football in your will.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I want to bring up this. I think this is a great comparison. I mean, not to sound too young, Casey and I, back when both USC and Notre Dame were like really good at the same time. I mean, Casey was, I think, 1 and I was 2. I'm just thinking back to like the Bush push. Obviously, there's been times where they are good together after that, but that's when I think of really good teams, and we were both in diapers when that happened. So,
yeah, I mean, again, it's on one hand, like to Logan's comment here, if you want to throw it up on the screen.
Yeah.
Like I understand, not having Notre Dame makes your schedule inherently easier. Like that's the obvious like cop out. But at the same time, like USC, I don't know about last year, but maybe the year before that with Caleb, needed a measuring stick game, I felt like, to really show us, is this team legit or not? I mean, we knew last year, they started losing pretty early on. Michigan started it, and then Minnesota on. But USC got exposed with Caleb in 2023 that they couldn't play in cold weather. They couldn't handle Notre Dame's defense. And I agree that not having Notre Dame will inherently make your schedule easier. But at the same time, I feel like that game really has shown if USC is legit or not. And I know that USC beat Notre Dame, the year before 2023 and 2022 and still ended up kind of having a disappointing season. But that USC team was still very good. And so, again, I think having that measuring stick game on your calendar, maybe it's not a measuring stick game. Maybe it's a genuine game where both teams are good, which we could see this upcoming year or the year after. I just think it's a weak move. Like I think, it's to echo what you're saying, no matter how good the team is year in and year out, it's your rival. Like what message does that send to the rest of the country? If you're USC, I mean, you're showing that you want the easiest path possible to the CFP. And I respect that they want that, but I think there's other ways you can do that by making your team better, maybe by, I don't know other ways, but I think certainly getting rid of your biggest rivals is the weakest way to do it.
Yeah, no, I just kind of think it is. Just throwing up a couple comments that went off while Casey was talking about that. Why doesn't Notre Dame join the Big Ten? They tried to join, 50 some odd years ago and were like rejected and have been a prude about it ever since and just won't join a conference. That's my general understanding of why Notre Dame won't do it. Also, they make millions, hundreds of millions by themselves from NBC. So that's kind of that. Another thing here, if USC can't beat Notre Dame, then what makes you think USC can win a national championship? I agree. Because if you can't beat them, you're not going to win a national championship. You're not going to compete with a Georgia. You're not going to compete with an Ohio State. You're just not going to be able to. I'll even throw in, like an Oregon or a Texas at this point. You're not going to beat any of those teams if you can't beat Notre Dame, especially next year. They don't have a great quarterback situation there. It's not like the last 2 years where they brought in a very solid starter quarterback. They don't have that next year. it's obviously in South Bend. They can win that game a lot better than they have had chances last times.
To be fair, I mean, I think USC could still win a national championship without beating Notre Dame in a given season. Like we saw Ohio State lose to Michigan and win the national championship. Like I know it's different.
Michigan and Oregon, then
Yeah.
BTA and Oregon, and still they beat everyone. So.
Yeah. I want to go back to the contract because I saw a lot of people mentioning the fact that USC, like offered Notre Dame a long-term deal and then Notre Dame rejected it. Is there any proof that actually happened? Because I didn't see any.
Yeah, I haven't been able to find, because we were talking about this last night. Saw some people on Twitter beefing about it, and I just couldn't find anything about this like supposed 20-year deal is what I saw. Which I couldn't find any proof of that. Maybe there is. Maybe we didn't do a deep enough dive, but it just doesn't sound right. Another thing I want to talk about, I've seen 2 reports of things of Notre Dame potentially going for different schedule and stuff. Have you seen a Clemson one, I think maybe already in place for the next like 12 years, something like that.
Yeah.
And then I saw one rumor that they're looking to replace USC with UCLA. I saw one rumor somewhere about that.
I feel like
that'll be something.
That I like we talk about Notre Dame owning USC. I mean, talk like the ownage in that matchup would be just not even
astounding. Fair. Yeah, I agree with this. Notre Dame, they don't have a title game. It is harder, but at the same time, they can never auto bid into the CFP. Not to defend Notre Dame, but they can never earn that bye. Although we did see the byes kind of hurt teams. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what they do with whatever happens, because the CFP is going to change. I mean, it'll probably be 14 teams, right?
Yeah, which will help Notre Dame, obviously. And I mean, obviously, it's helped them by the format going to 12 because, I mean, Notre Dame, I mean, again, it's not a guarantee that they're always going to be a highly ranked team, but not being in a conference, it makes their schedule so much more ambiguous. And they had an easy schedule this year. Like, their schedule really didn't have any marquee games except for maybe the USC game. And we saw them
Texas A&M. That was it.
Yeah, that was it. And I mean that Texas A&M game, like
Texas A&M. I mean, think about it. USC beat them in the Vegas Bowl.
It was also like week 1. Like not that necessarily matters a whole lot, but Notre Dame had a pretty easy path to the CFP, and by removing USC, I mean the ball is in USC's court. I feel like, right? Because it just feels like, yeah, appreciate it.
Turn it down, show.
Yeah, for sure. Roll Tide, right? Yeah, I mean, it just feels like, I mean, look, then as far as negotiations go, I've heard like, oh, the ball's in USC's court, the ball's in Notre Dame's court. Like I've heard both sides of the story. But the fact of the matter is Notre Dame has no reason, like there is absolutely no reason why Notre Dame wouldn't want to play USC. Like I can't, they beat USC a lot historically, a lot more than USC's beaten Notre Dame. Why should, like, it makes zero sense. And so I can't get behind the argument that USC is in the right here and that Notre Dame is weak or Notre Dame is, trying to cop out of this because they have zero reason. I know like the months of the year thing has been, and I'd like to get your take on that. Because I heard that, just stuff, I don't know about, confirmed things, but I've heard that, the fact that the game is played in either November or October, right?
October. Well, it depends. When in South Bend, October, November, right. LA.
Just like that whole thing. It's a bad look for USC.
Yeah, no, I agree. Just adding on to this, the losing, it makes it a little easier because the anyone anywhere attitude from Notre Dame. Yeah. What was I going to say? I'm trying to think, because it doesn't make sense to me that this game would be moved. We're not going to talk about the weather of where that stuff happened because people got mad at us for that. But I did see one thing talking about playing the game at the start of the year. I like, if that keeps the rivalry, then sure, but I don't understand why it should move. And to be honest,
I agree. I mean, I think it's fine how it is. And again, I mean, the weather thing, like, I mean, won't go too deep into that because we had a whole episode on that, basically. No,
The
but
whole
like,
episode where people get angry about us mentioning the weather.
yeah, I mean, again, I think it certainly is in play, like undeniably. But USC like fundamentally chose to move to the Big Ten, knowing that
Yeah.
they would have to play on the road against Nebraska, against Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan State, like Minnesota. It goes on, and Notre Dame is no different than those teams, other than the fact that they field a competitive product every year. You know, like the
Yeah.
same can be said about maybe Ohio State, Michigan sometimes, but excuse me, I just think playing Notre Dame is not much different than playing a competitive Big Ten opponent, but you just know you have to play them every year, and so yeah, it just makes USC look weak, and I think USC has had that reputation, post whatever, maybe I don't know what pinpointed that, but maybe post like Reggie Bush era,
Yeah. I
like
was gonna say,
USC.
dare I say, like post Pete Carroll era? Like, I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, like Sark and Kiffin have been there since then, but still.
like Lincoln Riley teams, love him or hate him, have gotten the reputation of being kind of soft,
Yeah.
and some of that has been come with USC not having a good defense historically these past few
Mhm.
years, but some of that's also come with the fact that they just can't win on the road, and so yes, getting rid of Notre Dame makes your schedule easier, but in terms of your reputation, like it's not doing anything to help it. So
Yeah, look, I mean, I think I forget who mentioned it earlier. The national media trying to take down USC. The problem is, if you take away this Notre Dame game, it really feeds into this whole thing of Lincoln Riley is soft and USC doesn't want to play hard teams. Because obviously, last year, really hard schedule. But if you're continuing the Notre Dame game, I mean, obviously this year you have Notre Dame, Oregon, Michigan. Those will be the three marquee games right there. I'll throw Illinois in there. That's a good team. But those are the teams where you got to win someone. You have to win two of those games. If you remove one of those games, it means the standard for winning is higher. However, it means that you just look worse. You're playing easier teams because Notre Dame, they always get the reputation of playing easier teams, whether it be true or not. I mean, they usually play, a couple MAC teams, a couple mediocre Power Five teams, usually throw like Louisville in there, some ACC teams, and then USC, and then like maybe one or two other high major Power Five teams. So you just get a lower reputation, in my opinion. It just hurts them.
yeah, and let's look at last year's schedule, right? Like you have marquee games in LSU in Vegas.
Yeah,
You have Notre Dame, of course, and Penn State.
Michigan
Because I mean,
and
and
Michigan.
Michigan too, but I think they knew Michigan was going to be weaker, and they obviously were. And so, we look at and I think a lot of USC fans were like, "Oh, thank God we don't have to play Oregon." And then the USC goes out and has a mediocre record. I mean, they win the bowl game, but they're 7-6. And so my point is, I mean, they had a lot of automatic wins on the schedule and maybe a couple of games like we mentioned, like LSU, which a game that maybe they weren't favored in. And then Notre Dame and some other games that were marquee, and they still went 6-6 in the regular season. And so my point is, Notre Dame or not, USC still has a lot to prove.
Yeah. Just adding on to this right here. I mean, yeah, hypothetically, you throw a Stanford in there, a different older rival. They went 7-5. Is that really the standard that you want at USC?
No, not at all. I want to ask you, if Notre Dame comes off the schedule, which it looks like it might.
Yeah.
You brought up Stanford, but who would you replace that out of conference game with?
I just don't think they're going to do someone hard. I mean, obviously, they'll every once in a while do like a home and home. We saw that Ole Miss one canceled a while ago. Maybe you do like a home and home with some SEC team, something like that. I think that's kind of their thinking. But also, we'll see years where it's 3 group of 5 teams that are replaced. We're seeing Missouri State and Georgia Southern this year. Maybe we'll see like, a Mountain West team in there next some random year. Obviously, you get some primetime games, but you're not going to get that much. And it's also, I think, maybe they want to schedule harder Big Ten games. Like USC hasn't played Ohio State yet. Maybe throw them in there more. I don't know.
I think honestly, like just talking about this, like I think USC screwed itself by not capitalizing those past couple years in the Pac-12.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you think about it, yeah, you have like competitive teams in the Pac-12 in 2023 and 2022, sure, but they're not the same animal, as what we're seeing in the Big Ten. And I think USC could afford a loss against Notre Dame in a Pac-12 conference and go out and win the rest and be fine just because of the nature of the conference. But they didn't do that. And so I think they're facing the repercussions of it now, and they're putting the blame on external factors when the blame should be on themselves for not winning. And look, I think it's one of those kind of dropped balls by USC in a
Yeah.
moment and in a time where USC seemed to be doing a lot of things right. Like you had the new facility opening up, you have the class in 2026, new general manager, like a lot of big things happening. And then this goes out. And again, like you mentioned earlier, it's kind of been in the works for a while, but it's kind of all coming to fruition now.
Yeah.
And we're seeing what's happening.
Yeah. It just, and on this, Roger Yard, just like this year, this is a good schedule this year. Putting LSU and Notre Dame as your out of conference is really hard. Obviously, they won one of those games. They beat LSU. You're not going to do that every year, though. They're not going to beat those two good out of conference teams, though. So it makes it, you play less teams, you play less SEC, less ACC, less Big 12 teams. But I think it's better keeping that Notre Dame schedule. Excuse me.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, again, like the whole optics of it make USC look bad. And I agree, like there definitely is a lot to be said about like the leadership and what's going on behind the scenes. However, I think we can't really put a pin on it till we see what happens with these negotiations, because if what people are saying, especially in this chat, are true about the 20-year thing, like, that's one interesting point. But again, it just feels like USC is not wanting to play ball at the negotiation table, and it's really making them look like they don't want to, have that on their schedule. And again, it makes sense to an extent, with the scheduling, but it's such a good rivalry.
Yeah.
Like I feel like
It's
tradition.
so historic. You just got to keep it.
Yeah. So yeah, do you have anything else to add? Or
Yeah, no, I was just about to say, guys, we're wrapping things up here. I apologize. Kind of a short show today. If you have anything else in the comments, let us know, though. We'll keep this open for a couple more minutes, see if anyone else has some other things to say we'll address. It's sad that the rivalry might come to an end. Obviously, we've only been at SC, excuse me. I've been 4 years. I'm about to be a senior. You're going to be a junior. But still, it's depressing. It's one of the best rivalries in college football.
Yeah, it should. I mean, again, UCLA is a good rival to have because, like you said, you can play them in everything, and it's outside of football, generally pretty competitive in every other sport. We just saw baseball, like USC take a series from UCLA at the end of the year, and that was pretty big, and that's pretty much the biggest reason why USC is in the NCAA tournament in baseball. But I digress. It's a good rivalry all around, but the Notre Dame USC football rivalry, those are two blue bloods. Those are two teams that people worship in terms of college football. And again, you just don't see that necessarily with UCLA. They're just not, don't take pride in football the same way that, Notre Dame and USC do. And so it's a big detrimental thing if USC doesn't play Notre Dame.
Completely agree. Well, we're not seeing anything else in the comments, so I think we're going to wrap things up here. If you have any other thoughts, leave them down below after the video. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We really appreciate it. We'll be back next week. Should be 7 Pacific again, assume so. But if any scheduling changes, we'll be up. We'll post an announcement. So thank you all for tuning in, and have a good one.